Have you ever experienced anxiety, or do you currently experience anxiety? Have you been told to change your thoughts if you want to overcome your anxiety? Well, changing your thoughts is extremely powerful, but there's always something that's holding us back from being able to rewire that anxiety mode. If you want to hear more about this and more about how to overcome your anxiety for good, keep watching. Before I get into that, I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Coach Carissa. I'm a mental and emotional health coach, and I focus on rewiring the brain with better thoughts, habits, and emotions so that we can feel better and overcome depression, anxiety, panic attacks, PTSD, and general worry in our lives. Have you experienced anxiety, and is it really affecting you to the level where you feel like you can't do your work properly, or you feel like it's affecting your relationships, or you feel like it's affecting your daily life? If you are, or if you have, I can completely understand because I've been there myself. So how is it that I know so much about this area, you may ask? Well, let me tell you. About 7 years ago, I experienced some pretty incredible panic attacks. I had struggled with anxiety and depression for about 10 years prior to that. And during this one night of a panic attack, I had reached that point where I thought I was going to die. It was pretty severe, and I knew with every fiber of my being this was going to happen. Now, I remember that at some point during this panic attack, I had an awareness shift where I was almost pulled from my body, and I wasn't outside my body, but I could observe myself. And what I saw was somebody cowering afraid in front of a dark cloud. Now, I attribute this cloud to my emotions, and I remember at the time thinking, if this cloud touches me, I'm going to die. And I knew it deep within my soul. And I remember also thinking, I might not have control over my death, but I do have control over how I feel when I die, and I refuse to die afraid. And in that moment, I chose to let the cloud touch me and to go into it, not knowing what would happen and thinking that I would die. Now, when the cloud touched me, remember, it felt like I was punched in the gut, and this overpouring, powerful feelings of emotions went through my body. It was radiating through my cells. Everything was on fire. And then when I thought I was going to die, surprisingly, it started to fade. And all I remember is being left alone, feeling a lot lighter, but suddenly I could see all these thoughts that were behind all of this emotion. Thoughts that I'd previously been unaware of. And they were hanging there in the air, slowly falling down, and I could see each and every one of them. These were thoughts that I'd been completely unaware of before in my anxious state. I had no idea these thoughts existed. Thoughts like, you're not good enough, you're a failure, who do you think you are, you can't do that. And suddenly it became very clear to me why I had experienced anxiety in the first place, and why I had also felt so demotivated in my life with low self-esteem. It had everything to do with these thoughts, and these thoughts had created my emotion. Now, you've probably been told before that thoughts are created, or anxiety is created from fearful thoughts of the future, all those what if thoughts. What if I'm going to die? What if my partner breaks up with me? What if I lose my job? What if I can't pay my rent? What if people are judging me? And this is true. Anxiety is caused by these thoughts. So many people have said if we change the thoughts, we can change the anxiety. That's only partly true. The problem is that many of the thoughts that are actually fueling this emotion, those deep unconscious thoughts, actually lie underneath the fear and the emotion that you have. Now, the brain is an animal. Our brain is a very instinctual animal, and its main goal is to keep us safe. Our brain does not like pain. So any feelings of sadness, hurt, anger, fear, the brain actively avoids, and it has you resist even feeling it so that you won't risk being hurt or you won't risk dying. Now, the problem is this: If we can't feel our emotions, then we can't uncover the true thoughts underneath it, and we can't change them. During anxiety, what happens is we usually get such a buildup of these negative emotions that it starts to cause an overwhelming feeling that you're going to die. Now, you can imagine somebody swimming in an ocean. So imagine somebody swimming in an ocean and normally the water is calm. Now imagine that as we think negative thoughts, the waves get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until now this person's being thrown around these waves and they now feel like they're at risk of dying. This is how the brain feels when it gets overwhelming negative emotions. It starts to get thrown into feelings of a panic attack or heightened anxiety, because now it believes it's a threat or at risk of dying. Now, this is actually quite a normal state. This is your brain's survival mechanism and survival state. The difference is we didn't know before how to handle it. Now, the interesting thing is that human beings are the only animals in the world that are capable of projecting themselves into multiple futures or projecting themselves into multiple future scenarios and imagining those future scenarios. We are the only living being that can do this. So while other animals might experience anxiety due to a learned anxiety, such as learned abuse, humans are the only ones that can experience anxiety that is brought on mentally by fears of the future. And mainly it's because we don't understand how this fear response works in our brains to begin with. So what's happening is your fight or flight response is getting activated because we have this overwhelming feeling that I'm going to die, because we're projecting these what if thoughts into the future. Now, why exactly does this happen? This is very fascinating because it's another key trait of your brain and why we experience it. Your brain doesn't know the difference between the past, present, or the future. So when you imagine something happening in the past, your brain will assume it's happening now. When you imagine something happening in the future, your brain also assumes that's happening now. If you were to imagine that a tiger attacked you, your brain feels, and then your brain will feel that that tiger is actually attacking you. It'll be the exact same as if the tiger actually attacked you, and your brain will react the same way. The same areas of your brain will light up, and the same fear response will take place. So it's really important for us to acknowledge this fact that in order for us to reduce these fears and reduce this anxiety, focusing on what we want is a big factor rather than focusing on our worries. However, some people can get stuck where they find that they're unable to switch their focus from their worries to focusing on what they want. Now, this is the big problem, and this is what most people won't be able to share with you about overcoming anxiety, so pay attention now. If you want to overcome your anxiety and you're feeling stuck, you're unable to shift those thoughts, and you're maybe not even sure of the thoughts that are causing the anxiety to begin with, you can do one of two things. Number one, you can imagine that the outcome that you want to happen has happened right now. So if you're driving and you're worried that an animal's going to jump out at you, if you're driving during a snowstorm or someone else is driving and you're feeling anxiety, if you imagine that you arrive home safely or that you have arrived home safely and everything was totally fine, your brain doesn't know the difference between it happening now or in the future. It'll assume that you've arrived home safely, and it's going to reduce those feelings of anxiety right now in the moment. The second thing that you can do, if you're aware of an overwhelming thought, such as I'm going to die, or I'm not safe, or if you're worried that your partner is going to break up with you, what you can do is actually take out the fear response by imagining your worst fear happening. Now, you'd think that this would make a person more anxious. Actually, the opposite is true. We're more aware or we're more afraid of the feeling of fear than we are the actual fear itself. When you can acknowledge that fear and imagine that thing that you're most scared of happening, imagine that your boyfriend broke up with you happening, or imagining that you died happening, your brain suddenly realizes that you're totally fine. I mean, even if you die, well, what more can you do about it, or you wouldn't feel anything because, hey, you're dead. Surprisingly, when we do this takes away and it deactivates that anxious response almost immediately. Thank you so much for watching and following today's episode of Mindset Matters. If you're currently struggling to get out of your anxiety and these 2 tricks don't work for you, then you can contact me for a complimentary session where we're going to do an NLP matrix fear clearing, and you can experience the ease and lightness of changing your thoughts when you're not feeling such a heightened emotion. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, mindset matters.